Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 14th of Study With Me. European Union Law, this podcast helps you get ready for your university exams and gain a deeper understanding of the subject. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty central, actually. It's Article 352 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union.
Ah, yes, the famous flexibility clause.
Exactly. It sounds simple, maybe, but it's incredibly important, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just some technical bit of law. You can almost call it the EU's constitutional safety valve.
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack that, look at its legal role, its constitutional place.
And figure out how the EU uses it to balance two competing things. The really strict limits on its powers, the ones the member states laid down,
Right.
and, well, the practical need to actually do things to achieve the goals set out in the treaties.
That tension.
Yeah.
Rigidity versus necessity. It feels like that's at the core of so much EU law.
It really is.
And the whole system rests on this bedrock principle, the principle of conferral. So maybe before we even talk flexibility, we need to establish just how rigid that starting point is.
Definitely. You can't understand the solution until you grasp the problem, so to speak.
So conferral, Article 5 of the TEU.
That's the one. Think of it like this. The member states gave the EU a specific toolbox, nothing more. Article 5 TEU says the Union acts only within the limits of the competences the treaties expressly give it.
Expressly. So no wiggle room there. If it's not written down, the power isn't there.
Pretty much, and only to achieve the objectives also set out in the treaties. It's a double lock.
So if the treaty doesn't mention, say, regulating the color of bananas, classic example.
Yes. Or maybe something more serious like specific aspects of digital policy initially. If it wasn't foreseen and written down, the EU couldn't just decide to act.
Okay. And Article 4 TEU backs this up.
It does. It basically says anything not given to the Union stays with the member states. Full stop.
So the EU isn't like a federal government in the US or Germany with some kind of inherent power?
Not at all. Its origins are more like a very unique international organization. A sui generis one, as the lawyers love to say. It only has the specific powers it's been delegated. Derived powers, not original ones.
Which is a huge difference from a typical country. It can't just invent powers because something seems like a good idea.
Correct. And Article 5, Paragraph 2, hammers this home the speciality of EU competences. If it's not listed, it wasn't handed over.
Reflects that voluntary nature of the member states choosing what to pool.
Exactly. They remain the masters of the treaties. And this isn't just abstract theory. It has a very concrete consequence for every single EU law.
The legal basis requirement.
Precisely. Every directive, every regulation, every decision has to point to a specific treaty article that says, yes, the EU can act on this subject using this procedure.
And choosing that legal basis isn't just ticking a box, is it?
Far from it. It's a fundamental choice, dictated by the main subject matter and the purpose of the act. Get it wrong.
And the Court of Justice steps in.
Yes.
Right.
The ECJ reviews it. If the institutions based an act on, say, an internal market article allowing qualified majority voting, when really it was about something requiring unanimity under a different article.
The whole thing can be thrown out. Annulled.
Exactly. It's a powerful constitutional check. Keeps the EU within its assigned lanes.
Okay, so that sets the scene. A very tightly controlled system based on explicit conferral. So what happens if there's a real need to act, something clearly linked to a treaty objective, maybe like tackling cross-border pollution before specific environmental rules existed, but the treaties just didn't provide the specific tool?
That's precisely the gap Article 352 TFEU is designed to fill. It's the way to deal with that kind of legislative silence without needing the massive undertaking of a full treaty revision every time.
Way to adapt, then, within the rules.
Dynamic adaptation, yes, within the existing framework.
Right, let's get into the specifics then. This is absolutely key exam stuff. What exactly does it take to use Article 352? What are the conditions?
Okay, we can break it down into three essential conditions. Pillar 1, necessity.
Necessity.
The proposed EU action must appear necessary to achieve one of the objectives set out in the treaties, and importantly, within the framework of the policies defined in those treaties.
Appear necessary. That sounds a bit vague. Who decides if it appears necessary? Is it just the Commission thinking it's a good idea?
Well, the Commission proposes, so they make the initial case. But appear necessary has been interpreted to mean, essentially, that the objective can't be effectively reached without this action. It's not just convenience.
And the court can review this necessity.
Oh, yes. The ECJ ultimately judges if the claim of necessity holds up. And if the action is proportionate, it needs a solid link to a treaty objective.
Got it. Okay, pillar 2.
Pillar 2, absence of power. This is crucial,
Meaning?
meaning the treaties must not have provided the necessary specific powers anywhere else. If there is another article, another legal basis that could be used even if it's procedurally difficult or requires unanimity when they'd prefer QMV, they must use that other article.
So 352 is genuinely a last resort, a gap filler only.
Strictly a gap filler. It protects the integrity of all the specific legal bases the member states carefully negotiated.
Makes sense. Okay, and the third pillar. This sounds like the big one, the procedural hurdle.
It really is. This is where the institutional balance and member state control comes in. The procedure.
What does it involve?
2 key things. First, the council representing the member states must act unanimously.
Unanimously. Okay, wow. That's a major check right there. Every single member state has to agree.
Every single one. It's a national veto, essentially. No member state can be forced into action under 352 against its will.
And the second part of the procedure.
The council must also get the consent of the European Parliament.
Consent. Not just consultation, but actual agreement from the Parliament.
Yes. Full consent is required. This brings in the democratic element involving the directly elected body.
So Commission proposes, Council needs unanimity, and Parliament needs to consent. That is a very high bar.
Extremely high. It tells you this clause is meant to be exceptional. It's deliberately designed to be difficult to use.
Why involve the Parliament with consent specifically?
Well, it adds significant democratic legitimacy, doesn't it? Especially when you're acting without a specific pre-agreed legislative path laid down in the treaties. It ensures the action has broad political backing.
So that triple lock commission, Council unanimity, Parliament consent, it really acts as a brake.
A very powerful brake. It ensures any use of 352 is thoroughly vetted, politically and constitutionally, by both the intergovernmental side in the Council and the Democratic side in Parliament, prevents any kind of power grab by, say, the Commission on its own.
Okay, but even with those breaks, couldn't the EU, use this clause bit by bit over time to slowly edge into areas it wasn't originally meant to be in? Competence creep, as they say?
That's the big fear, isn't it? And that's exactly what the Court of Justice polices very carefully. There are clear constitutional limits.
Such as?
First and foremost, using Article 352 cannot lead to a stealth amendment of the treaties. You can't use it to get around the formal treaty revision procedures in Article 48 TEU.
So it can plug a gap for a specific action, but it can't rewrite the EU's fundamental powers.
Precisely. It provides flexibility for action, but it absolutely cannot be used to expand the EU's list of competences permanently.
Any other major limits?
Yes, a really important one. Actions based on Article 352 are explicitly forbidden from leading to the harmonization of national laws and regulations if the treaties elsewhere exclude harmonization for that policy area.
Ah, that's critical, because harmonization, making national laws the same across the EU, is often seen as the deepest form of EU intervention.
Exactly. So this limit protects nationally sensitive areas, often things where the EU is only meant to support or coordinate, not take over with uniform rules.
And the ECJ watches over all of this.
Constantly. The court checks that the action genuinely relates to a treaty objective, respects these limits, no harmonization, no competence expansion, meets the procedural rules, and is actually necessary. It prevents abuse.
Okay, before we look at examples, there's another concept floating around: implicit powers. How is Article 352 different from that? They both seem to deal with powers not explicitly written down.
That's a really good question, and key for exams, they are different. Implicit powers theory, which is linked to the idea of utile or practical effectiveness.
Making sure EU law actually works in practice.
Right. Implicit powers are those considered indispensable for the EU to effectively exercise powers it already has.
So, like the power to make international agreements in areas where it already legislates internally, that's now partly codified in Article 216 TFEU, right?
Correct. It's an auxiliary power, a power needed to use another power effectively. It's about the means to exercise an existing competence.
Okay, so implicit powers help execute existing mandates. How does 352 differ?
Article 352 tackles the situation where the EU lacks the primary power itself. The competence isn't there in the first place, but action is needed to achieve a treaty objective.
Ah, okay. So, implicit powers, necessary means for an existing power. Article 352 creating a temporary basis for action when the primary power is missing altogether.
You've got it. One is about exercising existing power effectively. The other is about acting where no specific power was foreseen, subject to those very strict conditions.
That distinction is much clearer now.
Mm-hmm.
So historically, where did we see Article 352 making a real difference?
Oh, it was vital, particularly in the earlier days, before major treaty revisions like the Single European Act or Maastricht. Think about areas like environmental policy or consumer protection.
They weren't really in the original EEC treaty, were they?
Not explicitly as areas for EU legislation, but as the single market started developing.
It became obvious that, say, different national pollution standards could block trade or distort competition.
Exactly. So, to make the internal market objective work, which was a core treaty goal, the EU needed some common rules on the environment or on consumer safety.
And since there was no specific legal basis,
They turned to the Flexibility Clause, Article 352's predecessor. It allowed the EU to pass foundational legislation in these areas, linked back to the broader market objective.
so it acted like a bridge, allowing the EU to address new needs linked to its existing goals.
Precisely. A catalyst for organic growth. Eventually, of course, specific legal bases for environment, consumer protection, and other areas were added in later treaties, often building on what was started under the Flexibility Clause.
Interesting. So it can pave the way for future treaty changes. Has it been used for other things, like setting up EU bodies?
Yes, quite often for creating specialized EU agencies, especially if an agency's role cuts across different policy fields or needs a structure not spelled out in the treaties. You'll often see the legal basis for an agency citing both a specific article and Article 352, kind of for a legal backup.
Belt and braces. Okay, so even when 352 is used legitimately, passing all those hurdles, the action itself still has to comply with the general principles, right? Like proportionality and subsidiarity.
Absolutely, always. Subsidiarity might be less relevant if 352 is being used, precisely because action is deemed necessary at the union level where no power exists, but proportionality is key.
Meaning the action taken can't go further than needed.
Exactly. The EU must choose the least intrusive means possible. If a directive would work, don't use a regulation. The burden imposed must be proportionate to the objective being sought.
So even if the EU correctly uses 352 to fill a gap, the ECJ could still strike down the resulting law if it was excessive or disproportionate.
Yes. That proportionality check is the final backstop, always ensuring the action respects limits on EU power.
It really highlights that tension we started with flexibility, but only through very rigid controlled channels.
That's the paradox of Article 352.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful, especially thinking about exams. So to quickly summarize for everyone listening, Article 352 TFEU is that vital but exceptional safety valve.
Right. It lets the Union act when needed for a treaty objective, but only when no other specific power exists in the treaties.
And its use is locked down tight, procedurally by Council unanimity and Parliament's consent.
And substantively, no sneaking in harmonization where it's excluded, and absolutely no using it to permanently expand the EU's list of competences.
It's the mechanism that allows some adaptability while trying hard to respect that fundamental principle of conferral.
Precisely.
Okay, maybe one final thought for you to ponder as you revise your notes. While Article 352 gives the EU some operational room to maneuver,
Remember who ultimately holds the power to fundamentally change the EU's competence list, to add new permanent powers, like the exclusive ones listed in Article 3 TFEU.
that power stays with.
The member states. Only they, acting together through the formal treaty amendment process, can truly expand the Union's mandate. They remain the masters of the treaties.
Which underlines that, despite its evolution, the EU legal order is still grounded in the agreement of its member states.
Keep that balanced flexibility within strict limits, ultimate power with the member states in mind as you continue your studies.